Hi there, welcome back to my channel Code Canvas. In previous video, we learned about CSS class selector. In this video, I will explain pseudo CSS class default. So the default pseudo selector will match the default in a group of associated elements such as the radio button in a group of buttons that is selected by default, even if the user has selected a different value. Let me show how that syntax looks. Input type is equal to radio and default pseudo class plus label after pseudo class is there. Here you can write down content, and in content you can write default color, for example red, and font style italic. So you can select radio buttons like input type is equal to radio and default as a pseudo selector. So the CSS targets the label coming immediately after the default select a radio button in a group of radio buttons. Let me show you with example. Here you can create one form, and in form you can add UL, another list item, and here you can add input type is equal to radio button, a name is equal to ID, for example value we can keep it blank for now, id is equal to rd, same as name, label next to input, label for rd, and this is first first radio button, for example you can just copy and the name will be same, the id will be different, radio 2 second, rd3, here rd3 and rd2. So this is the basic simple HTML. You can create another UL below this, li, and add input type is equal to checkbox, name is equal to banana, for example value you can keep same banana, and id is equal to r1, for example you can add label with for banana, and the value is banana, right? So this is the first element for this UL. Just copy that li, paste it, and change the value to apple, and the third one you can add div, for example sorry, it should be name, value, id also you need to change, and id you can give same value, div, and div. Here checkbox you can keep checked by default, both the checkboxes, and you can add one paragraph. Here you can add one select drop down with option read, option selected. It will be selected by default. Green, blue, and select button is there. You can add new label here. Select one. You can add another paragraph. Input type is equal to submit the button. Value is equal to submit. Add one label. Submit. Add another input. Type is equal to reset the form. And another label to show the reset button. The label. Yeah. So this is your form, and if you see, this is the default form CSS. So when you want to use a default parameter, for example, right now nothing is selected, but for example, if you want to add a checked here on radio button, you can add checked here, and you will see it is checked by default. So using default in CSS, let me show input type is input for all input, not for type. Input pseudo default plus label, that will select the immediate label after input, and in after you can add content default or whatever you want, but default is a good example. Color you can give 999 for example, or anything you want. Font style, not size, font style Italy. You can add select background color red, width let's say 250 pixel, padding font size 16 pixel, keep appearance none, select button, and for option you can add Webkit appearance none, you can add background green and display none. You can't target the label, it has a different parent, so you can add this CSS. And let's see, as you can see here, this is a radio button which is selected by default. So we have added this default pseudo class and text. If you inspect this, you can see label after label after content color and font style. So using this default pseudo class, you can use a default parameter, a default form element to make it look a default. Like as you can see, all checkboxes which are selected by default, the default text is there. So this is the useful parameter. This is the useful CSS which you can use to show the user interface will be a very good. And when you say the browser support, different browser have different levels of support. Firefox provides full support. WebKit browsers supports default on buttons but do not radio and checkboxes, and Opera is the inverse, supporting it on radio buttons and checkboxes but not on the submit. Hope you like this video. Don't forget to subscribe. That's all for this video. See you soon.